Are you a scaling SaaS founder?
Ready to make the leap from leading a team to leading an organization? Join us each week as we refill your think tank with actionable tips and strategies from great business minds you know and those who don't know yet. This is SaaS Fuel with your host, 5-time entrepreneur, SaaS founder, and globetrotting adventurer, Jeff Maines.
Welcome back to the SaaS Fuel podcast, where micro doesn't always mean small. I'm your host, Jeff Maines. I help B2B SaaS founders like you grow from traction to scale. Here, growth is more than just numbers. It's about crafting a future-proof company, premium valuation, and leaders who build a business of significance while living epic, adventurous lives. Can you imagine building a SaaS that scales efficiently, turns a profit quickly, and solves a real-world problem, all without heavyweight infrastructure? Welcome to the world of micro SaaS. Well, what is a micro SaaS? Lots of us have heard the term, but when I ask other founders, I got a dozen different definitions, a few jokes, which kind of tells you the kind of people I hang out with, and a few blank stares. But micro SaaS refers to a SaaS business that typically serves a niche market or caters to a specific audience or serves a very specific problem. It's like a tiny but mighty SaaS powerhouse, offering specialized solutions with a touch of charm. These micro SaaS ventures are characterized by the compact size, focused offerings, and often solo or small team operations. They may not have ridiculous resources or feature sets like large platform SaaS companies, but what they make up for it with is agility and personalization and a really unique value proposition. But micro SaaS isn't about staying small or not scaling. Who would want to do that? The micro in the term is about the focus of the solution. It is laser focused. It's like the difference between a shotgun and a precision rifle. Both have their place, but very different use cases. If you look at the patterns that they make on a target, very different. And so micro SaaS solves a very specific problem. And creating a micro SaaS is starting smart and scaling with precision. It's a lean, focused approach to SaaS that really just revolutionizes the business model, combines productivity, profitability, and purposeful growth. I'm convinced that there will be probably a unicorn created in the next few years anyway, with a very, very small team, maybe less than 10, could be one. I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens when we talk about some of the micro SaaS offerings that are out there. But many SaaS founders believe that success equals size. More features, more markets, more employees, more stuff. You ask a founder, one of the first things they'll tell you is how many people they have. And that's like a marker of success. It could be, but it also could be that you're very inefficient in scaling. And just that mindset often leads to diluted efforts, bloated cost, and loss of core value. It's much more difficult to maintain that core value and culture across a team of 100, 200, 500 versus 10, 15, 25. So what's the real challenge? I think it's building a SaaS that remains agile and impactful without succumbing to the pressure to overexpand. And my gosh, there's a lot of pressure for that. So what characterizes it? One, I think, is streamlined operations. Micro SaaS means that you streamline operations from day one, and that's the mindset you have going forward. And it's not trying to do everything on a shoestring. That's not the point. But it's doing it very efficiently, capital efficiency, people efficiency, focusing on a core set of features and a specific target market. In doing that, you avoid common pitfalls of overextension and underdelivery, which nobody wants that. Second is rapid profitability. With lower overhead and a clear value proposition, a micro SaaS business can reach profitability way faster, sometimes month one. That's a pretty cool thing, right? It's not about cutting corners or thinking small or just trying to do the absolute minimum. It's about smart resource allocation and maximizing the impact of every dollar spent. Does it make the boat go faster? If it does, let's do it. And if it doesn't, we don't have time for that. Third is scalable solutions. Just because you start micro doesn't mean you stay there. And again, it's not company size we're talking about with micro. It's market focus. But the beauty of micro SaaS is its ability to scale efficiently by solving a real world problem and establishing a loyal user base. You create that solid foundation for growth that you can adapt to over time and expand as your market does. You can enter adjacent markets. You can add on additional products. But think about a few, what I would say, micro SaaS companies in the beginning that you would definitely know and have grown up to be pretty significant. Buffer is one of those that I think of. Micro SaaS that started with a simple yet powerful idea, scheduling social media posts. They do a lot more than that now, but that was really the focus. And by keeping the focus sharp and operations lean, Buffer grew into a major player without ever losing its micro SaaS ethos, demonstrating you can scale up and scale big and still stay true to your roots. Others that you would know, and companies that have tremendous respect for, Basecamp. I love how that they've built. And they started out, very focused. Grammarly. Anybody use Grammarly out there? Yeah, that's a micro SaaS, very specific use case. And they've built an enormous organization, not in people and wasting a bunch of resources, but very large company. Lots and lots of customers, really focused there instead of just hiring a bunch of people. FreshBooks, MailChimp, Zenefits, huge companies that scaled smart, but that I would say, started out as a micro SaaS, very focused in their offering. So building a micro SaaS is not about limiting your vision. It's about amplifying your impact by focusing on efficiency, profitability, and solving really pervasive real world problems. I mean, Grammarly, hello, who doesn't have a problem? Who doesn't need that? Man, I do. We all do. You set the stage when you solve a problem like that. You set the stage for sustainable, scalable success in this crazy market that we call SaaS. And that is also what we call here future-proof. Our expert guest last week was Andrew Lee, founder of Parallaxis Capital. We talked about scaling up with a combination of innovative and practical insights, his crawl, walk, run strategy, and attracting top talent. And our founder last Tuesday was Ben Johnson, co-founder of Particle 41, a development firm he created to accelerate company initiatives through cutting-edge software development, DevOps, and data science. We talked about acquisitions, aligning the tech stack, leading through transition, and prioritizing fatherhood over engineering. Very cool episode. If you missed either one of those, go back and give them a listen. Lots of great nuggets in there. My guest today is Pascal Weinberger, co-founder and CEO of Bardine AI. They're an AI company focused on automating repetitive and manual workflows across web apps. A multi-time founder, Pascal has built and scaled other ventures, leveraging AI and machine learning for industrial applications, as well as leading the AI team at Telefonica Alpha, which was Europe's first moonshot factory. He's also an active angel investor in AI and deep tech companies globally. Welcome someone who solves everyday problems with elegant AI solutions. Pascal Weinberger. Hey, Pascal, welcome to SaaS Fuel.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to start Bardine AI.
Sure. My background is originally in computer vision. Been working in AI and machine learning for 10 years at this point. And I've always been fascinated by how we can use AI to actually have impact in the world. Done a bunch of other things before, started a company in AgTech that worked with Telefonica on so-called moonshot projects, which was really interesting. But all that time, I was always bothered by having to do so many annoying repetitive tasks. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with this problem where you have 50 tabs open in your browser and you're kind of
Yes.
the monkey copy pasting data between different things, and it's just frustrating. And so when we were looking at starting a new company with my co-founder, we both kind of had this notion of there has to be something we can do that makes automation much easier and accessible to people. Being an engineer by background, in our engineering workflows, there's tons and tons of automations. And every time you do something like twice or more times, you usually automate it, like you build a shell script or something for it. But then in our like normal lives, and when it's about recruiting or selling or project managing or just like everyday meetings and calendar handling and all that stuff, you don't really have that. Like there's no way of automating things in an easy way. So that's really what we wanted to do with Bardine. And ultimately our mission is to bring automation to everyone. So like build an automation tool for like, quote, the rest of us, the like non-technical,
Love
non-engineering
it.
people. And we use AI to do that.
That's great. And what are the challenges when you're trying to build it for the rest of us versus, maybe typical use cases you might see in IT?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it starts and ends with usability, right? Like if your core audience is an engineer or technical users or DevOps, they're used to a lot of technical complexities and like reading docs and writing shell scripts and things like that. So the tool can have a lot more rough edges. If you're trying to do something that everyone can use, it has to be basically self-explanatory and it has to be super easy to understand. And that's difficult to do. If you want to do something that's both powerful in the sense that it can automate a lot of different workflows, and we all have different workflows, right? Like no two people have the exact same workflows. We might be doing kind of the same, but we use a different tool for it, or we have a little kind of like a little difference in there and so on. So it needs to be powerful in the sense that it needs to cover all these like combinatorial explosions of things people can do. But at the same time, it needs to be super easy to use. And that's the real challenge, I think, of what we're trying to do. And the way we approach this is we use a lot of like AI, machine learning, language models to try to kind of reduce that complexity to, at this point, the extent that like either you're lucky and we have a pre-built automation for what you're trying to do. We ship the product with like more than 1,000 pre-built automations. If
Wow.
one thing you're doing is a most common workflow, then probably you don't even need to build it. You can just like take it off the shelf and run it, and it's way easier. Or you can use our what we call Magic Box. It's our AI driven automation generator that basically you just describe what you want to do in natural language, the same way you would describe it to your colleague or your friend at work. And then the AI kind of figures out the intent of what it is you're trying to do and actually builds the automation for you. And I think with that, you reduce the complexity of building an automation from either code in most cases or like a no code builder, which still is kind of really complicated for most people to use, to just like simply describing what you want to automate in natural language. And that makes it a whole lot more accessible. And long term, we're even trying to make it so that you don't even need to think about what you want to automate, right? Because like even with describing what you're automating, there's still this problem that a lot of people don't really realize that what they're doing is automatable right now. Like that, like we've done this since 10 years. It's like how I've always done it. Like, it's not necessarily like in your mindset. So that's kind of like the next step of the evolution where we want to take it and really make it so that like you don't even need to think about what you're doing and it just like automatically gets automated for you. Basically automating automation, if you will.
That's great. Let's bring it from like concept of automating tasks and what would some examples of those tasks be? What have you seen, the AI assistant automate that is such a time saver?
Yeah, it's a great question. Because the tool is very versatile, it can be many different things. We see a lot of use cases around the field of recruiting or sales or kind of research. And I'll give you an example. So basically, I work in sales. I do a lot of outreach every day. So I scour, for example, like conference websites or podcast guest websites, and I'm like looking at the
Sure.
SaaS Fuel podcasting, and I want to figure out like who are all the people that spoke at SaaS Fuel and like what do they do, and then I want to write custom outreach emails to all of them to sell them my service or whatever. And with Bardine, a way you can do that is you can go on the SaaS Fuel website, you can get the content list of all the guests that are there. It can understand what is it the guest is doing, like what's their job, what does the company do, and so on, and can use that together with AI models to build a custom outreach email and then put that email already into your draft folder in Gmail or Outlook or whatever system you're using. And it can also use an enrichment service at the same time to like figure out from like the first name, last name, company, what's the email address of that person. Right? And traditionally, you can do this manually. You can do this today. If you're a
Sure.
very ambitious sales person, you may actually be doing this today. But then for every person, it takes you 10, 15, 20 minutes to do it, and you have, I don't know, 170 something guests on the show, that's a lot of time investment. Versus with Bardine, the way you would do it is you would once define this automation, teach, if you will, the agent and the system how to do it. And then for the other 170, you just click a button and it goes in the background and goes and executes the workflow for you. So that would be one example, but there's many more examples. You can do this in recruiting, similar type workflow. You can be like, I want to find all the cool AI companies and like put them in a Notion database and keep it up to date. I want to, every time I get an email that contains an invoice, I want to get the invoice, add it to some Dropbox folder, and like run it through an OCR and add the invoice line items to a Google Sheet for tracking for my expenses, all sorts of different workflows. But those are some examples.
That is amazing. I mean, so many different use cases. So do
Yeah.
people get lost in trying to create? It's like, having a database for the first time. It's like, okay, I've got this thing that can store data. What do I do with that?
Yeah.
There's so many things, so many applications for the technology. Do people get lost, or does having the library of places to start, does that really help move them along quickly?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, like, if you're building something that's very versatile, it's both a blessing and a curse, right? Like, it's
Yes.
if you're building something that just like does one thing and one thing really well. Let's take this, like, this app that we're using to record the podcast right now on. Like, that's all it does. It's like, that's a podcast recording. It's a very easy sales pitch. It's very easy use case. Everyone immediately understands. It's like, okay, this app is for podcast recording, like, period. Versus
Right.
with what we're doing is there's a lot of different use cases. Broadly speaking, we're about automating, we're about saving time, reducing friction in workflows, but there's so many different instances in which you can do that, which again comes as a both blessing and a curse. The way we solve for this is, as you mentioned, pre-built automations. Like, don't let people start with a blank database, a blank
Right.
canvas in our sense. Give them something to work with. And that's why we have such a vast library of 1,000 plus pre-built automations that they cover most of the most common workflows, right? Like, at this point, we have like 250,000 plus users on the platform. So we listen to what people are saying, we understand what the user needs are, and then we build an automation, we put it on the catalog, and now next time the next person comes along, there's already something pre-built there. So that's one thing. Second thing is, how people find us today is mostly through SEO. So most people come to Bardine with a very specific need. They want to say, get podcast website participants into Google Sheet. It might be a very specific use case. They Google that, and like through their search engine, there's a landing page for each of these pre-built automations. We have a landing page, and this landing page will be, sometimes on the first page, sometimes on the second page, but somewhere on the Google search results. And then that's the funnel basically with which people start. So they never start with this like blank canvas problem, but they always start from a use case. And then the third thing we do is smart recommendations. So because we're browser extension, we sit in your browser. We have a pretty good understanding of what are the apps that you're using, what are the workflows you're doing. We can look at, like, are you using Notion? Are you using Airtable? Are you using Google Sheets? Are you using Gmail? Are you using Salesforce? Like, what are the different apps you're using? And then based on that, we can try to predict basically what might be useful automations for you in this context. And then essentially our recommendation engine suggests them to you. And sometimes they're the right ones, and then you can use it. You can imagine this like Netflix, like Netflix has millions of titles or hundreds of thousands of titles, and it's kind of like hard to find the right movie to watch. But like, they do a pretty good job at like figuring out what are the movies that I might be interested in through this recommendation engine. And similar to that, we have a similar kind of recommendation engine that tries to predict what's the good and useful automation for you in this context.
That's really helpful. And I think it's a great place to start. I mean, I did a trial for another software, not this, not this use case, but something else. And 7 days, and it went in. It's like a blank canvas. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm not really sure what to do here. Some kind of basic
Mm-hmm.
instructions. I could kind of build something, but it just
Mm-hmm.
wasn't what I was looking for, and ended up going with something else specifically for that
Mm-hmm.
reason. When in, they
Mm-hmm.
had templates I could take. Okay, we're going to use this, and we're going to customize it here, and wow, it was done in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. No,
something I tried to do with something else for 2 days.
yeah, I agree. I think it's always like, if you're trying to build a product for the rest of us, for like normal users. Again, if you're
Yes.
building a programming language or programming framework or something, then it's different, right? Like different user base. But if you're trying to do something for like salespeople, marketing, recruiters, business owners, SMEs, like you have to make it as easy as possible for people to find the right starting point. And that all comes with recommendation engines, AI, easy user interaction, right? Like text is something we're all used to. Like we're all used to describing our work in text. So it's something that like is a really easy modality for people to get started. And that makes it much more accessible than, say like, a blank canvas, no code builder, like the experience you've described. So I think all these little tweaks that we're doing, they're all with the ultimate goal of making it super accessible. Like I always think about it like, my mom works in a bank. She opens accounts in a bank. It's like, obviously high security environment, so it's a different setting, but she does it like this exact same thing every day. It's like I look at it like, as a kid I would go there like, after school and see sometimes her doing the work, and I just look at it and I'm like, wow, like A, you must be really bored, and B, like it's mind numbing, and C, there's so much efficiency. Like there's so much, like you could be 100x or 10x more productive, which, for the bank as a whole is a huge productivity gain. And I think that's
Yes.
true for a lot of roles. It's true for a lot of people in sales, recruiting, marketing, project management, founders, or business owners. Like there's so much efficiency that we can gain as a society that like just unlocks so much new productivity. And then I think the exciting thing is like what we can do with it, right? Like I'm convinced that with a solution like Bardine, right, like but there's many more, with a solution like Bardine, anyone can shave 10%, at least 10% of the time that you spend at work. If I looked over your shoulder for a whole day, we guarantee you, like I could find like inefficiencies for 10% of what you're doing. So like think about that. Like if you can have 10% more time, you can get 10% more stuff done. That across all of the economy, that's a huge gain in productivity. So I think that's, what really drives us. And then like all the cool things that can be done with it. You can spend more time with your family and you can do more fun things, or you can just be more productive and have more output. But that's
That
ultimately
just
up
works
to you
more.
then. Yeah. Yeah. That's probably what I would do. But
So many of us do.
yeah.
Yeah, the automation is just amazing what you can do, and it's mind blowing when you start really thinking about the number of things that I do on a daily basis, and that I did yesterday, that I did the day before, and I don't think of them necessarily as repetitive tasks, but I'm starting to change that now with Bardine,
Hmm.
and thinking, hey, wait a second, I just did this again, and I love having the prompt in the browser
Hmm.
because it figures out, hey, you did this before. Do you want to automate
Hmm.
it?
Yeah. 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 I think, long term,
Exactly.
our vision. Yeah, I think long term, our vision is to become this like, genie on your shoulder that kind of like sits there and in a, privacy preserving, secure way kind of watches what you're doing. And it goes like, hey, like, hey, Jeff, there's something I've seen you do like for the third time now. Like, how about we just automate this for you? And you take the burden of like identifying, building, and actually executing the automation. You take that burden away from the end user and you put it on us because like we're supposed to help you with automation, right? Like that's what we're there for. So you kind of completely close the loop on automation and make it like super accessible. I think most tools today that you see in the market, that most of them are just like executing automation. Like that's a traditional RPA, that's a
Right,
Zapier, and
right,
so on, right? And then someone has to build them, right? Like usually they come with consultants or they come with like service contracts or something that like they will like
right.
build the automation for you. It's fairly complicated, expensive, and so on. And then like the platform is just there to run it. Now with AI and so on, you more and more see that like people make the building part easier, right? Like with language interfaces and so on. That's what we have with Magic Box, what I talked about before. You just describe it in natural language. But I think ultimately, if you really want to solve automation, you have to close the whole loop. It's like identify, build, and run. And if you can make all of that easy, solve all of that with AI, make it accessible to the end user, then you can really bring automation to the scale. And that's ultimately what we're trying to build with Bardine.
I like that. With the sitting in the browser and kind of watching what I'm doing all the time, is there any privacy concerns? Anybody, push back on that?
Yeah. So let me be clear. We don't do that as of today. This is something that we have active research on. We don't have this rolled out with users or anything. So as of today, if you're using Bardine and you install it, you have to tell it what you want to do in natural language. We have research projects and some development work that we're working on where it does look at what you're doing and so on. And internally, we use it. Like I use it. I have to, you know, a special version of the extension installed that actually watches what I'm doing every day and tries to predict, automations and so on. Like privacy concerns is like the way we will set this up as we roll it out to users, it will all happen on the browser. Already with Bardine, the runtime actually sits in the browser. And like when you're automating something, the API calls or the data movement and everything happens like from your browser to the third-party service, say Notion or Airtable or whatever, directly. So from a security profile, it's the exact same risk that you have of just using a browser to begin with. So yeah, I don't think there's going to be major concerns. It'll be a big question about like how do we position it, what's the narrative about it, and all that stuff. But from a pure technical point of view, we will make sure that it's like as secure and as stable and as privacy preserving as possible. And then the rest is kind of a narrative situation.
Which makes sense because it's doing things that you're doing manually right now anyway.
Yeah. It's like you
So it's
already
not like
have the
sending it
risk
out somewhere or
exposure.
doing anything weird.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. This is not your first company. You've done this before, other ventures, scaled, exited. One of the things you've done, you're an angel investor, bootstrapped, which I absolutely love. Done some really cool things. How have your past experiences influenced the way that you've brought Bardine to market?
I mean, I think like you live and you learn, I think one thing, so my very first company, we were very like verticalized, like agriculture. We were basically trying to sell to farmers, like disease detection systems using computer vision. It was a really cool product, really cool mission, but like go to
Yeah.
market was tricky to say the least, which we never really figured out, to be transparent. So that was a big learning. Then the second company, we were doing B2B AI contracts. So again, amazing technology, amazing team, scaled really quickly. But the sales cycles were very long. Like you got very little feedback, you got very little sales data because you had to, go and wine and dine with companies, CIOs and CTOs and VPs of whatnot. And like it would take months to get any indication and feedback. And all the while you're kind of building product in a vacuum. And then like the feedback you get is either they buy or they don't buy. And it's a very
Mm.
hard way of building product. So what I wanted to do with
Yes.
this company is have a very close feedback loop. I truly believe that like the best companies out there, they have a very tight feedback loop with customers. Like if you can build something and then ship it and get feedback and measure and adjust like as quickly as possible, that's like a really fast velocity in developing your product, developing your go-to-market. And ultimately, what I think like long-term will make companies succeed is like nailing and making this loop as fast as possible, like as high frequency as possible. And for us, we can do that with this individual user product led growth approach. We have like hundreds to thousands of people signing up per day. A lot of them don't stick, a lot of them don't ever talk to us, but some of them do. Some of them give us amazing feedback. They tell us exactly like, hey, I wanted to try Bardine, I wanted to try it for this specific use case, it didn't work for me, can you make it work? Or they go like, I
Mm.
wanted to try this worked, but that didn't work, or I didn't understand X. And like those types of feedback, they're like incredibly valuable, right? Like, because otherwise, like we always, like any founder, any product and like developer, they will all build the product to their best of knowledge. But like truth is no one
Right.
knows. Like no one ever knows like how to build the best
Yep.
product. Like the only way to know is to like get feedback from users as much as you can. So that like this product-led growth approach that we're doing now allows us to have a very fast feedback loop, which allows us to build I think one of the easiest products to use on the market today in this automation category. And that's all only possible in a very short period of time because of this tight feedback loop we have with end users. So I think that was the biggest learning that I took into this. And then there's all other, kind of like standard company learnings of like hire people smarter than you, keep the team small and mean. We're like 34 people now in the team. We've accomplished a lot with a very small team, but like I think there's a lot of learnings with the previous company. We scaled very quickly, like 120 people. And like, truth is you sometimes get slower if you're more people. Like there's a lot more bureaucracy, a lot more processes, a lot more this and that. So I think like there's a lot of these little learnings about just like how to build a business and how to build a company that I took into this. But I think for me, the most impactful thing was this like product feedback cycle with users. I think that's the single most important lesson learned for me.
I like that. It's really important having that fast feedback as you can
Mhm.
adapt and just like you said, somebody tries something and hey, it didn't work for me. Can you make it work? That's
Yeah.
such a great feedback that you get from users of kind of what they're trying to do, how they envision the product working. And as long as that fits your vision, it's like, yeah, we can deliver that. That's easy.
Yeah. Yeah. At least you get the data, there's always another question that like we as founders or product managers have to make about like, what do we do with this data? I think there's another
Yeah.
famous, like the kind of the other side of that argument would be, Henry Ford famously said that like, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Instead, I gave them
Right.
cars. Right. So it's like sometimes there's these leaps that you just have to kind of push through. You have to have high conviction on this. People may not want to have it or they don't ask for it, but you have to understand, like fundamentally think from first principles, like what's the big unlock in this market, develop the conviction and just like push for it. For us, that's this moonshot project of like automating automation that we talked about before. No one really asks about it. No one talks about it. In fact, when we pitch it to people similar to you, there's a lot of questions that come up about like, oh, is this secure? Is this private? How is this going to work? Is this actually going to work? Do I want this? But then truth is that like I'm very convinced that it will like work and it will be a big unlock in the market. And there's some good examples for this, right? Like some of you may know this like browser extension called Honey. They're basically like they do coupons for checkout pages, and that's a very similar concept. Like they basically watch what you're doing. They identify that like you're on a checkout page of some online store, and instead of
Right.
you having to look for the coupon codes, they go and look for coupon codes for you, and they just suggest it to you. They're like, hey, I found a way for you to save 20% on this whatever shoes that you're checking out right now. Just click yes and you're good. And like that's kind of like where a big part of this inspiration comes from. And now, like I don't do much shopping in general or online shopping especially, but like, I have Honey installed, and now like, even without thinking, like sometimes I end up saving money. And I think that you can bring the same concept to automation. And it's proven, like people have like they have tens of millions of users that have this installed, and it has the same kind of privacy and everything concerns technically. So I think like if you
Right.
develop strong conviction for something, you just push for it, and then you can make it work.
That's a great example. Yeah, very common. If you want to build a future-proof company, then check out Champion Leadership Group. It is the ultimate resource for SaaS founders and C-suite executives to continue to develop themselves, scale their companies huge, and never walk alone on the journey. We've solved the biggest scaling challenges to get your SaaS to 5, 10, 20 million ARR and beyond with on-demand fractional C-suite team and operating system built into software that makes growth easy to manage and operations world-class, plus a community of scaling SaaS founders. If you're stuck at your current revenue level, this is for you. If you feel like the world's best kept secret, we've got your back. And if you are crushing it already and know that your company has another gear, this is definitely for you, especially if you're busy and have no time. I hear that at least 10 times a week. We create 20% more free time in the first month. Sounds pretty good, right? Now is the time to upgrade from traction to scale. If you're ready to work smarter, not just grind harder, visit championleadership.com. It's where leaders evolve and companies transform.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things, product-led growth, I've seen a lot of companies do that poorly. You do it really well. And
We're learning.
freemium is another one that I think a lot of companies don't do really good. And Bardine is outstanding at that. How well have you seen the freemium model work? And, how often do you get people to upgrade from the free account? You see a lot of people do that, or do a lot of them just stay free?
Yeah, so look, like we're still learning this. It's very charming that you say we like nailed it, but honestly, I don't think we have yet. I think there's a lot more
That's
we
why you're
can
so
learn and
good at it.
improve on, but probably also. But I think like, so for us, like why freemium? Again, like there's this element of like, how do I get as much user feedback and data as I can? And it's kind of funny, if people pay for a product, they think you owe them, rightfully, because they paid you. But if you give something away for free, they feel like they owe you something. And like we always
Yeah.
ask, we're like, hey, give us feedback, like, in any onboarding email and product flow and everything, everywhere we ask for feedback. So like, because we gave it to you for free and, hopefully it actually had value for you, saved you time, you saved a bunch of time with it and so on. Like now you're actually willing to give us something back. And the thing you're giving us back is this feedback, which again, talked about it before, is I think the most valuable thing for us as a company at this stage. So I think that's why we do freemium. It's really important for us to just like keep our product velocity high, build the best possible product out there, and so on. Obviously, we're a business, we have to start making money at some point and so on. So we started introducing paid fairly recently, I think about 6 months ago, that we started introducing a paid tier. But we do it in a way that like the vast majority of use cases you can still do on the free tier. You only get kind of in the paid version of the product if you're doing something that's clearly work related. So you're integrating with Salesforce or HubSpot or Pipedrive or any of those like CRM systems, or you need like enrichment data and you like want to enrich like name, email, from LinkedIn profile to email address or something like that. So things that are like clearly work related and you clearly get value for work. So like usually at the end of this workflow, you're making money with it. So like that's where we now are starting to introduce paid. And this is working fairly well for us now. And we're still in the early stages. We're still experimenting with, what's the right, how much do we give away for free? How much do we charge for? What's the trial conversion time? How long do you get to try the paid features for free? How much do we charge? Where do we charge? What's the flow? Right? There's so many variables that we're still figuring out, but we're kind of starting to get a little bit of a handle on it. And then there's a second thing that we just launched a few weeks ago that I'm personally most excited about. It's like collaboration and teams, right? Like if you look at any company or any team, mostly people in the same team do the same work, right? Like take a sales team, for example. You have 20 SDRs in a sales team. They're all supposed to do the same work. Now you hire the 21st salesperson. Now you need to onboard them. You need to make sure that they always update the same field in Salesforce that everyone's else updating. They probably forget it a bunch in the beginning. And, then like now you offboard an old guy, like, and you onboard another one, like now you need to do the same thing over and over again. You need to make sure that there's consistency across the workflows. And obviously you want your sales team to be productive, because the more leads they generate, the more revenue ultimately you generate as a company. So I think there's a huge value proposition in standardizing and automating the workflows of teams in businesses. And that's now where we're pushing for a new kind of like version of the product that we've just launched and announced. That's basically team workspaces. So you can think about it like your Dropbox shared folder or your Notion workspace or something like that, where you and your team, you can invite as many people as you want. You and your team have access to the same standardized automations, and you have all the standardized billing and permissions and all the standard things that come with it. And then that allows you to now you hired a 22nd person on your sales team, you add them to this Bardine workspace, and from day zero, they know what to do. Because you don't actually need to teach them the workflow. You just need to tell them hey, here's the automation that you use for adding a new lead and writing the outreach email and whatever. And you can encode your organizational knowledge and the workflows into these automations. So I think that'll be a huge value proposition for new companies, especially companies that are scaling quickly and so on. As they're expanding their teams, they need to hire a lot of people quickly. The onboarding becomes a huge problem. Encoding organizational knowledge becomes a problem. And obviously, time and efficiency are huge factors. So I think that's a new product line that we're pushing for now that I think, from a monetization perspective and everything is hugely exciting.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I love that they're able to share those automations, with each other. And so everybody has that on the team.
Mm-hmm.
They're very cool.
Yeah. See, I mean, it's very recent. We just have a few people trying it now. So we're starting to get some exciting feedback. And again, we're, closing this product loop and making it better every week. But this is something that we're really excited about now.
Yeah, everybody should go sign up for the free tier for sure. And definitely look at the teams. I think that's really good.
Yeah. And give us feedback. It's like, this was useful. Tell us what you need to see. Tell us what you want to see. Tell us what worked, what didn't work, what could be easier. That's always useful.
Outstanding. I had another question and I lost it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, here we go. We'll count back in. 3, 2. Yeah, as you've built Bardine, try that again. Here we go. 3, 2. As you've built Bardine, what have been some of the greatest challenges in building, scaling, and really coming to market with something that is this broad and unique?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think like as we touched on earlier, having product like Bardine that can do so many things for so many different people, it's both a blessing and a curse at the same time. I think for us, in terms of go to market, one of the big challenges that we're honestly still working through is just like the messaging and positioning, precisely because it's not just, the tool for podcasters to record their podcast. It's a very simple
Right.
message, very simple go to market. You clearly know your audience, you know how to market it, you know where to market it, message is clear and so on. For us, there's a lot of nuances to this. So we're working through this right now. One of the approaches we're trying and we're investing a lot of energy into is this idea of like verticalized solutions, right? So like we do Bardine for sales, Bardine for recruiters, Bardine for marketers, etc., which basically has
Right.
pre-packaged solutions that we know from best practices in other teams, like what salespeople need. And it comes with the right integrations pre-built, it comes with the right playbooks pre-built, it comes with the right kind of just narrative around it. Um, and that's kind of like how we're trying to push for go-to-market now, that we kind of take vertical by vertical, which obviously allows us to be much more specific with the messaging, much more narrow and go-to-market and so on. Having said that, we obviously like the long term, what we want to build is we want to build the automation platform for everyone, right? So we need to find the
Right.
right balance there in terms of like being narrow enough that we get good traction on specific verticals, not becoming just the sales automation tool, for example, right? Like there's nothing wrong with that. Amazing business is built in there and so on. But our long-term vision really is to like become the automation platform for everyone. So that's something that we're like struggling with right now. It's just what's the right balance? How do we do that? What's the right narrative? What's the story around it and so on?
Sure.
And then, yeah, there's all the like usual things that I think anyone company struggles or will struggle with is, hiring the right people and go to market, learning this whole like positioning game and everything. And there's millions of tactical things, right? Like what's the right price point? What's the right, we talked about this before. What's the right feature set you give away for free versus paid? How do you do that? And there's millions of different little, like the right onboarding email sequences, onboarding in the product. There's so many different like complexities to work through. So I think like any one of them obviously is manageable and doable. I think like as you're building a product like this, there's just like a vast number of these little challenges that like the complexity adds up quite quickly. But I think like we have an amazing team. We're working through this right now. I think like we're already in a pretty decent spot, but we're always looking to improve and learn on this. So that's kind of top of mind for us today.
Sure. And I know you use Bardine in your own business. Do you think that has
Yeah,
saved you having to hire additional people? Is it doing the
for
work
sure.
of one or two or three people today?
It's hard to quantify. I think so in some areas of the company, for sure. So like in our go-to-market team, sales team, and so on, they're using obviously themselves for prospecting and so on. I'm sure that they're
Sure.
a lot more productive. I don't know if they're like double as productive or not. I know that like, when we look through things and so on, I know that they're saving a lot of time. It's hard to quantify sometimes. I think for me, myself, it's really convenient because I do a lot of things, right? Like as a founder, you kind of have to jump in and fill holes everywhere. So time is really of the essence, right? And even if it's little things like you're about to go some trade show conference and you need to like figure out like who are the interesting people to meet there, right? Or like, and then doing outreach and setting up meetings with them and so on. Like all these little things that you're doing, like I always try to set up an automation for it. And for us, it's amazing product feedback too, right? Like because they're like, if we need to automate it, chances are other people need to automate it too. And we're the
Yes.
best users of our product, right? It's this concept of dog fooding. Like I think every company should try to use their own product to as much extent as possible. Otherwise, it's like it's going to be users finding bugs and issues, and that's always bad. It's always better if you find those issues yourselves. That's a big thing we're doing. And the way we do it especially is that we have like the version of Bardine we use internally is a few versions ahead of what we have out publicly. So there's a lot of like, features we launch every now and then that are experimental and we're just starting and we're experimenting with it and so on. So that's mostly what we're doing internally, is just also testing all those things, like Teams being an example. We had Teams used internally for a few weeks before we launched it publicly, just to iron out all those obvious kinks. And there were some bugs here and there and so on. You don't want your users to find them. You want to find this internally. And before you put it out there, it's really critical.
Absolutely. You've been doing AI for a long time, 10 years. What advice would you give to other founders looking to leverage AI in their own startups and businesses?
It's an interesting time now. I think really hard about what you're doing and what the ultimate problem is that you're solving. I believe that like with this new wave of machine learning and AI that's happened thanks to large language models and like the technology being much more accessible now than it ever was before, I think there's two things that happen. One is everything and everyone is doing an AI company, which is not necessarily a good thing. A lot of them are very little value, and that's not to say anything bad about companies, but
Right.
if you're just building a wrapper on someone else's product, that's very rarely defensible. And people have learned this in previous cycles of technology where a new piece of tech came out, and then there's this like crazy spring of like millions of companies popping up that are essentially just like very small variations of the same thing built on top of this new technology, and like very few of them actually make it and survive. So I think that's one thing that I would encourage everyone is like think hard and long about the defensibility of your product, not in the next 6 months, but in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. Like, how is the
Makes
fundamental
sense.
technology going to evolve? And like, are they just going to eat your business for breakfast? And we had this with OpenAI very recently, right? There was a lot of companies that were doing like small developer tools that were kind of solving like problems around the edges of what the dev platform from OpenAI, for example, could do. And obviously, they're improving their platform, so they come out the next
Right.
year with a better version of the platform, and they solve all these problems that previously were businesses that were trying to raise, millions, tens of millions of dollars around solving like edge cases for what their platform was doing before. And then like now with the next version, like why would anyone buy this from a third party company if just the main platform provider already solves it? So I think like there's a lot of that happening, which I would be very careful about as a founder. But then the second thing is I think like the most exciting thing for me with AI today is that it enabled completely new businesses. So I talked to this guy yesterday just through some founder connections. And it like that to me was one of the most exciting like application use cases. So he's in the debt collection business, which not very sexy, not very well known, and so on. But it's a huge industry, right? Like billions and tens of billions of dollars every day that people just don't pay. Businesses have losses with it, and so on. And it's a very
Right.
repetitive process, right? So like what they do is they use these large language models and so on, and a bunch of other machine learning techniques to really automate the same way that like Google ads and Facebook ads and so on automate the perfect messaging for the perfect user in the right timing. They kind of do the same thing, but for debt collection. And I thought that was like a brilliant, idea, because it's such a niche market. Very few people think about it. And they take this existing technology and with very little effort and very little kind of technical engineering talent, they can enable a whole new type of business for this like small ticket debt collection that previously was just not economical to do. If you owe someone $20, like no one's going to come collect that because, and this is not to encourage anyone, but like because just the time
Right.
and effort of human labor to collect that would be so much higher than even if you were to ever pay it back. But like now, if you automate it, it works. I think another amazing example is Duolingo. Like, sure, everyone knows language learning app.
Yes.
Like, obviously, it's much better to learn if you have a private tutor with you. Now, that's really expensive. Most people can't afford it and so on. But now with these new language model technologies, like they become so good that like everyone can have their own private language tutor on Duolingo, and it
Right.
enables this
Right.
whole new class of use cases that like were previously just impossible or uneconomical to do that are now possible. And I think that like if I was a founder today and I have somewhat limited experience in AI and machine learning, those would be the kind of businesses I would be looking for. What was previously impossible to do or uneconomical to do that now can be done with just adapting existing technology that's now readily available everywhere to this new market or this new use case. I think those are the businesses that are going to win, and then do it in like niche industries. Do it somewhere where like very few people are looking, like debt collection. And I think those are going to be the hugely successful businesses for new founders. Obviously, if you're very technical, you can push the technology boundary forwards and do more involved things and so on. But I think for this audience of like aspiring founders, that's kind of the businesses I would be looking at.
Outstanding. What do you think the future of AI is? Where is it going from here? Things have changed so much in the last year and a half and continuing. So what does the future look like?
That's a tough question, especially if it's recorded.
Of course it is.
But I think first of all, things are accelerating way faster than anyone thinks.
Yes.
I had these conversations every few months in the last 10 years. And people were always like projecting, like, when do we have AGI? When do we have AI that understands humor? When do we have AI that can solve, elementary school math exam and so on? And all these things people were always projecting like far ahead. And like now all of these things are solved, like we've solved Go, we've solved high school math exams, we've solved, like the Turing test, the original Turing test. Like when you're talking to ChatGPT or me today, like probably you think I'm a robot and ChatGPT is a person, just because, I'll probably answer shorter than like ChatGPT does and so on. So I think like all these previous things that we thought were like long out there or impossible to do, we've solved now. So I think that's to say that like the pace of innovation is so incredibly fast that it's virtually impossible to predict what happens. I think there's going to be a few big themes we're going to see, especially with this new like token prediction models. That's essentially these large language models. One is we're going to see them applied to different modalities. Now we already see image generation and video generation models, which are cool and amazing for consumers. But I think the more interesting things are going to be material sciences, physics, chemistry, biology, all the things that have underlying systems and rules that these language models are really good at modeling and predicting, that we can use to exploit new physical properties. So I'm thinking generation of new materials in material sciences, better and faster nuclear fusion, better and faster nuclear fission, like in energy technologies. Obviously, in genetics, it's amazingly exciting. Like COVID vaccine, the BioNTech COVID vaccine was to some extent with AI generated. The way they found out like what are the sequences of amino acids that we need to chain to build the right vaccine. And I think that's just going to accelerate now that we have more compute, more data, everything's more accessible. So I think like the next exciting wave that may not be as much talked about in public, but I think in terms of impact, it will be huge, is going to be applying this technology of large language models into other areas like material sciences, physics, biology, and so on. I think that's something I'm personally really excited about. Other thing that's happening is humanoid robots are becoming a thing.
Yes.
I'm sure you've seen some of the recent demos. Tesla is famous talking about it. There's a really cool company called Figure One. Just Google it. They have some really cool demos out there that are basically using this like large reasoning models. And robotics is actually getting to a stage now where the actuators and everything are becoming like really good, and then you can basically build humanoid robots. So I think that's going to be exciting, and I think the timeline there is also much shorter than most people think.
Yes.
And yeah, I think those are the two big things. And then my personal prediction would be like AGI. So this idea of like general intelligence, it's also very short. I think like the timeline is much shorter than most people think. We already have multimodal models that can look at text, video, images, and other modalities at the same time. That's usually one thing that people in the AI field were very skeptical about, was that previous models they were either vision or language or audio. They were like one thing at a time. Now you can use the same model, the same training infrastructure, everything to do all the different modalities. So I think that's going to really accelerate. And then obviously another factor that's often forgotten and talked about is we use AI to build AI. So like
Yes.
we have programming assistants, Codex and others. NVIDIA chips famously are actually generated. The chip design is actually built by AI algorithms. A lot of the optimization algorithms and training and machine learning algorithm are built by AI. So you have this like by definition exponential growth loop, because your systems are getting better, and then you use those better systems to design other systems, which then in turn become better. And you have this like, again, feedback loop that's really fast,
Right.
which I think is a huge accelerator for this year. So I'm really excited. I think like now is an amazing time to be alive and to be witnessing this. But yeah, it's hard to predict exactly what will happen.
It is. But it is, everything that we're talking about is going to happen so much faster
Yeah.
than people think. I've seen tech move fast before, never anything like I've seen in the last year. And it's only getting faster. I think it'll probably go twice as fast this next year,
Yeah.
maybe faster. Because just like you said, it's machines iterating on machines. And so the algorithms are getting better and better because they're improving themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows?
Yeah,
Then
it's
then
cool.
the machines will all take over, and so you in all your requests now you should say please and thank you. That's so then the machines will remember you were nice to them.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, I think we should have these debates, these philosophical debates about safety and everything, because it is becoming a real situation. I think like 5-10 years ago, people were talking about it, and it was really philosophical debates, because like AI couldn't even, if you had a glass and you would turn it upside down, it couldn't figure out it was a glass anymore. Like there were like
Right.
very simple like ways to trick AI systems. Now they're really smart, in the sense. So I think it's becoming a real thing. I'm a bit skeptical about regulation. I think because the field is moving so fast, it's very hard to regulate. Like it's impossible. Like regulators are supposed
Sure.
to say like, what are you supposed to do for the next few years? But like even the people working in the technology, we don't even know what's possible in a few years. So it's going to be
Right.
very hard to find the right balance between regulating it to the extent that you make it safe enough that there's not much public abuse and people don't use it for bad purposes. But at the same time, you allow enough room for experimentation and progress and so on, because frankly, we don't know what's going to work and what doesn't work. So it's hard to
Exactly.
regulate. So that's going to be interesting to see over the next few years too.
Yeah. Very cool. It's such a great conversation, Pascal. Thanks for being on SaaS Fuel.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeff. This was really fun. And yeah, thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. And we'd love to get feedback on the product and just, let us know what you think. If there's anything we can do, anything you want to automate, we're all ears. And yeah, exciting to see you next.
Definitely. Where can people learn more about you and about Bardine online? We got to make sure we close that feedback loop.
Yeah, so for Bardine, it's bardine.ai, just a website. There's, you'll find everything else in the nav bar taking you there. You'll also find the link to download the product. Again, it's a Chrome extension, so you're going to want to do that on your desktop. It's hard to install extensions on mobile. So I think that's one thing. About me personally, it's like on LinkedIn, Twitter, Pascal Weinberger. Just find me there. Feel free to reach out. Super excited to learn from people. And yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Outstanding. We'll make sure and link all of that in the show notes. It's great to see you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. See you. Bye.
Thanks again, Pascal, for coming on the show and sharing your journey and insights. Everyone needs to go check out Bardine. The use cases are endless. Every time I think of a new one, someone has already figured out how to do it. So it's just plug and play for me. That's just awesome. You can learn more about Pascal and Bardine at bardine.ai. As always, all links, highlights, resources, and full show notes are available at saasfuel.com. And be sure to check us out on YouTube as well. Full episodes, video episodes, YouTube shorts. We've got training. We've got some outtakes, lots of stuff on the YouTube channel. So go check that out as well. Thought leaders share. So share this episode with someone who loves discovering hidden gems in AI, like Bardine. They'll thank you. And everyone who shares this week gets an automation automator. Hey, it's a robot that builds other robots to do your work. Just hope it doesn't start a union or demand coffee breaks. Or, you can just automate with Bardine AI. So be sure and check that out. Join us Thursday on our SaaS Fuel Expert Series, where my guest is Michael Begg. He is co-founder of AMZ Advisors. Michael will be here to talk about digital marketing and lessons from $500 million in e-commerce sales and how you can apply those learnings to your SaaS PLG motion. And the next Tuesday, we have founder Beth Nevins, founder of Developa. We'll talk about the transition from Series A to Series B, leadership development, navigating the complexities of talent strategy, culture development, and business growth. So I will see you next time. And as always, enjoy the journey.
Thanks for listening to SaaS Fuel. Full show notes for each episode, which includes a summary, key takeaways, quotes, and any resources mentioned, are available at saasfuel.com. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're enjoying the content and getting value from these episodes, please leave us a rating and review at ratethispodcast.com/SaaSFuel. We'll be sure to read these out on future episodes.